Hello, listeners, and welcome to Debra and Peter are doing a podcast with me, Deborah Alcock-Tyler, and my twinny, Peter Wanless, both of us having celebrated our birthdays last week. How was it, Peter? Because you were away in Switzerland. So how was the conference and what happened for your birthday celebration in the end?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I am back from 6 days in Switzerland, high up in the Alps. My birthday was on the day that I was presenting to a board meeting, and then that was the kind of precursor to a conference with head teachers from all over the world. So I've spent 3 or 4 days in a kind of network of 200 extraordinary people from around the world. You can't get too much of a good thing. It wouldn't be my choice of how to spend my time with quite so many people for quite so long, although there were all sorts of interesting people and it was my first time with them. So I do remember you doing a little booklet about networking to help people who find themselves in those kinds of situations, which I think I reviewed.
You did,
back in the day.
I'm holding up now, listeners. For those of you who can't hear it, it's networking, part of DSC Speed Read series. Anyway, go on. Yes, you did review it, Peter.
So, using some of the kind of techniques there, it was less necessary because there was 200 of them and there was one of me, and I was quite new. But it does, after a while, become relentless explaining what you are doing as the independent safeguarding advisor in this environment. Nevertheless, the setting was absolutely fantastic, and we did all sorts of interesting things, including there was an afternoon of activities. And I signed up for an artisan bakery course because I thought that was consistent with my new country living lifestyle, and also not quite as energetic as climbing a mountain or doing a challenge hike or cycling up one of these mountains. It was the great indoors was slightly more appealing, and that was wonderful. Learned some new skills from a family bakery that has been going for years and years up in the Alps. So that was as well as learning an awful lot about education and safeguarding and contributing to the conversations. I also brought home an almond cream tart wedged in my luggage, and some soda bread made with a culture that originated from 2009. So what's not to like about that?
Is that legal, Peter? Are you allowed to fly foodstuffs from Switzerland to the UK?
I don't know. No one stopped me.
No, I don't know either, actually. I know there are some rules about it, aren't there? Anyway, if anybody's listening, don't not tip anybody off. The evidence has been eaten.
It has. It's too late now. It's in my stomach.
And did by any chance 200 people warble happy birthday at you, Peter?
No, I didn't. That really would have been.
Yeah, well, because I got warbled at by my team. So we have a tradition at DSC is that whenever it's anybody's birthday, a day that's nearest as possible to their birthday, we all sing online happy birthday to them, and everybody jokes about how utterly dreadful it is. And I actually completely forgotten about it because, of course, our birthday was last Thursday. And, but today was the first day that everybody was in. And so they got me. They sang at me, Peter, and it is truly dreadful. I don't understand why my staff haven't written into our head of personnel complaining or a formal grievance about being sung happy birthday to. So put it this way, we're never ever going to get on Britain's Got Talent as the DSC choir, that's for sure.
Well, there's another anniversary today, which is that this is the 1-year anniversary of this podcast.
Wow.
This is our 45th episode. So we've been chatting with one another for at least 22 and a half hours. And I wonder how many people have joined us for the entirety of that. And if they have, congratulations. And what are you doing with your life?
Yeah, it would be fun to know if any listeners have listened from the very beginning, or even if they haven't tuned in every week, if they've caught up on previous episodes. Although you kind of hope they don't, because, I mean, we must surely be repeating ourselves by now, although it doesn't feel like it. It always feels there's something new to get outraged about, which there is, by the way.
Oh, go on,
I
then.
come full of outrage today, Peter,
at
the announcement by the new Home Secretary about, again, it's this bloody obsession with immigration, which I do not get. So with the politicians and the media, as I don't understand the obsession, because they are not the cause of most of the problems in this country. And we end up talking about that rather than what really matters. But anyway, this new thing about, persuading immigrants they're not welcome is that you have to have stayed for 10 years, I think. But the thing that pressed all my buttons was, one of the suggestions is that they have to volunteer. And if they volunteer, that will help their immigration status. And it's like, it's made me so angry. It's such a stupid idea, completely contrary to the whole spirit of volunteering. It's like forced labour. It's like, basically saying to people, if you don't volunteer, you'll lose your immigration status. Now, I don't know about you. I don't want people to volunteer for my charity, because if they don't volunteer, they're going to be forced to leave the country. I want them to volunteer because they care about the cause and because it matters and because they feel committed to it. It's just, I mean, maybe I'm just having a cross day, but it's just pressed all of my buttons and all of my, you can't price stupid buttons. I don't know what you think about it.
Well, I can see why you're angry, and the easy option is just to agree with you. But in the interests of provoking you a little bit more and just trying to explore what they're trying to do here, I mean, there was similar, wasn't there, last year when there was this proposal that all young people should do national service, and if that wasn't in the army, then it would be deployed as volunteers into all sorts of charities. And at the time at the NSPCC, I was thinking, oh gosh, what are we going to do with these scores of young people? At the same time, when we were young, certainly when I was in the sixth form, we did community service, and I guess that was forced on people, and we were sent out into the community to learn about doing good in one's neighborhood. And at one level, that was forced. It's a bit like forcing young people to play sport. You might not choose to do that, but actually to be a well-rounded citizen, if you can play in teams and go outside and you can appreciate your community and understand the value of charity and community engagement, that's no bad thing. So I suppose being charitable and positive about what the Home Secretary is trying to do here, is she not saying that if people are in this country, there is value in appreciating and understanding and connecting with the civil society around you, and actually that is enriching in both directions if people know and understand one another better? There you go. That's my attempt to have an argument.
Well, first off, so I completely agree with it at school, because for me that's about education. So introducing kids to sports, introducing them to communities, introducing them to volunteering, that's about showing young people what's possible and showing them the world they live in. In terms of doing it for immigrants, so if it's about trying to help charities, why not force everybody to volunteer? Would it not be better if you just say, as soon as you hit the age of 18, you have to do mandatory volunteering to prove that you're, responsible? So it just doesn't make any sense. And actually, I would be with you if I thought that was the reason. If it was, this is a way of encouraging it. But it's not. It's absolute bullshit. What it is pandering to a very small minority of haters who are determined to make immigrants and migrants and refugees the butt of all the ire in the country and the cause of all that's wrong. That's the challenge for me. It wasn't presented as we should encourage volunteering across the whole nation because it's really good for everybody to understand their communities. Yeah. Or even, we should be saying to predominantly white communities, go and volunteer in the predominantly Muslim communities or Jewish communities or, Afro-Caribbean communities. So you can learn something different about British culture, by the way, because I no longer think that the cultures of nationalities and ethnicities who have been here for decades are not British. They're integrated into part of our society. Anyway, you did manage to provoke me further, but that was the aim.
Yes, and of course, a huge majority of the population, we're all immigrants of some sort at some point in time, aren't we? And so I do see that value in mutual appreciation. I mean, I think I'm almost certain I've said this before, but one of the really exciting things about these international schools that I've been working with in recent times is sitting down with the kids from countries all over the world. And yes, they are reasonably privileged children who are very fortunate to be in this situation. They're potentially some of the leaders of tomorrow, but the appreciation and understanding that they have of one another, because they come from so many different backgrounds and cultures, is the superpower of the school and a fundamental part of their education. And it's not that certain cohorts are being singled out and saying it's essential that you have to appreciate these other people. It's we have to engage and appreciate and understand one another. So yeah, perhaps if this announcement had come out of the DCMS or been following up an initiative by the NCVO to get volunteering off the ground. I mean, I wonder how deeply they were involved in this announcement before it happened.
Well, highly unlikely. I mean, listen, I'm well connected, Peter, and nobody's mentioned it. I mean, it came as a complete surprise to me. So I'd be gobsmacked if they'd spoken to the sector about it, or even if the Home Secretary had spoken to Lisa Nancy or Stephanie Peacock, who are ministers for, society. But actually, it also brings me on to another thing which I shared with you. So there's a woman on LinkedIn called Joanne Lockwood who wrote a very interesting Substack piece about how we've become a society of people who, if the initiative doesn't benefit us personally, we think it's a bad initiative. And I emailed it to you to see what you thought about it, Peter, because I was very struck by it. So what was your view?
She made a number of really interesting points around that theme. One thing it reminded me of was an interview which Richard Osman gave on the Giles Brandreth podcast, Rosebud, which again, I've mentioned that recently. This is my favourite podcast at the moment, Giles Brandreth's Rosebud. And Richard Osman was talking about how successful he had been as somebody on the television, and he draws this distinction between people who have speed of thought and people who have depth of thought. And he says, you can be really successful in the media by being quick-witted and having a quick reaction to everything. And he suggests, and I really do agree with this, that politicians are like that increasingly now. Yeah. And that's what you get on Question Time, or it's why I don't listen to the Today programme anymore, because it's so formulaic, what people say, and you get credit for having a really quick reaction to something. So everyone should volunteer because if they're an immigrant to the country. What do we think of that? It's great, it's hopeless. And then you move on to the next idea, as opposed to people who think really long and hard about what are the underlying problems and what we need to do to address them. So when Tony Blair said tough on crime and tough on the causes of crime stuff is really interesting. And arguably there were debates going on at different time frames. And certainly when you run organizations, you do have to think about the day to day. You do have to be able to answer the question in the moment, but also there's a reason why some institutions last 100, 150 years and others explode, because there's depth of thought. And so
well, of course, that's grounded, Peter. That's grounded in real research, that sort of quick, slow response. So there's a book called Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow by a psychologist called Daniel Kahneman. And we'll put all the links to everything we reference, of course, in the notes of the podcast. But he was a psychologist. And in fact, he won the Nobel Peace Prize, won the Nobel Prize for Economics, interestingly, even though he's a psychology, because he was talking about decision-making and how people engage and interact with information. It's an absolutely fantastic book. And it talks about how, we take shortcuts in our thinking. So we create a heuristic and model. So we've referenced this before, but a bit like you say the word pensioner, and automatically people think poor, freezing to death, sat in a cold front room, covered in scarves, and that's in the middle of August, so that we make these shortcut things in order to enable ourselves to navigate life. And they're useful to us in certain circumstances, but actually you need also to be using your brain to think through exactly as you say, more deeply, more considered, see all the other things. So that it's actually based in. But I think there's something about it's a bit like the online world, isn't it? Is that everything is so fast that now we're expected to be fast, and people's attention spans appear to be so much shorter. I mean, I know now, for example, if you write an article longer than about 500 words, it doesn't get read. People are just put off by the sheer length of it. So yeah.
Yes, I find myself struggling to get to the end of newspaper articles.
Yeah,
and because it's kind of drummed into us that you see the headline or you read the first bit and you need to get
got it. Yeah,
to the next thing, and that's compounded by all that. I mean, people have always complained about electoral cycles and short-termism in politics, and the shareholders and the investors need a return on their. So there are lots of pressures which lead you to the kind of superficial and the short term, which, as Richard Osman says, there are people who can do that really well.
Yeah, I'm good at it.
And they're increasingly the leaders, yes, and those people who are the kind of academics and the researchers and the writers of longer form pieces.
Yeah. It's comedians as well. It's comedians are really quick thinkers because they've got to be able to do riposts and things like that. So yeah.
So that was an interesting dimension, I thought, to what she was saying. But another one, and this is more thinking in my time as a kind of communications director, there is a trade-off between complexity and cut through. And if you want to engage and inspire, you do need to appeal to people's hearts as well as their heads. And this is where she kind of says that we've gone overboard in the kind of heart thing, and we don't get beyond the emotion rather than stopping to think about, well, hang on a minute, what might the consequences of this be? But certainly when I was in the civil service, I was probably a force for accelerated thinking and simplicity, because it used to drive me crazy that we did have these incredibly clever people, traditionally defined, who I would now admire rather more as deep thinkers rather than quick thinkers, because they were agonizing about the nuance and the complexity of issues. But oh my goodness, some of the issues facing education policy were so complicated that they develop a language and a vocabulary of their own, and then you have these people in great long meetings talking impenetrable terms about the pedagogic value of this, that and the other, and actually you need to inspire everyone to do something simple. So that was the kind of dimension of what she was saying, that I thought, well, you can get lost in the nuance and the kind of complexity if you can't cut through in politics with some simple slogans.
Well, folk don't they? Folk like to think that we're reasonable people who think things through and that we can justify our decisions. But the reality is, and again, there's masses and masses of research about this, is that we're very instinctual human beings. And what we tend to do is post-rationalize our decisions. So we don't realize we're making, in fact, there's some stuff about that in the book, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. So we have an instinctive reaction to something, and then afterwards we explain our decision by, by rationalizing it, post-rationalizing it. But there's something interesting, because I've always found that if you want to get people to change their mind, you've got to capture their hearts first, and then all the data does is it then backs up the decision that they'd already made, if that makes any sense. It's been very rare for me that I found that if you share data with people that they change their minds. Data is incredibly important, but it doesn't really drive decision making. You've got to capture the heart or press a button in a human being to get them open to it, and then the data will help to reinforce that feeling that they've got. And so that's certainly been a strategy I've tried to adopt.
So there are significant numbers of people who are anxious about the levels of immigration in this country, and a level of feelings.
Unnecessarily, of course.
Well, according to your data.
Yes.
But you've just said yourself that your data isn't sufficient to
it's not.
win this argument.
Right. Yeah. So you have to find a way to capture their hearts, and I don't know how to do that personally. But that's what we have to do, is we have to get them to see things different. And most of the time, Peter, the vast majority of people who aren't literally entrenched in this, in these attitudes and these things, that is that when they're a neighbour of, or they get introduced to, or they work alongside, they completely change their minds about it. It's like, if I think about the amount of trans hate there is out there, and I would pay good money to bet that those people who are so hateful don't have any trans people in their community, in their lives, in their families, or anything like that. And that if they did know somebody who mattered to them, they would have a different view of it. So, so I think, so that's just another example of how, that's why I kind of get the thing about integrating. I think people should have, people are allowed to have their cultures and to be proud of it. But I think that sharing cultural ideas, this thing that people have about, there's a term for it, isn't there, when you nick some other culture's thing, like Jamie Oliver got absolutely lambasted.
Yes, cultural appropriation.
That's it, cultural appropriation. Thank you. But I think cultural appropriation is okay. I think we should be able to adopt the customs and foods and behaviours of other cultures, because that's what makes life richer. It makes it more understanding. It makes it more, honouring and stuff like that. So I think like this whole sort of, this is mine and you must not touch it.
Yeah.
I am not sure I think that's the right approach. I think it's, this is mine, come share it.
Yeah.
It's a better way of looking at, bringing communities together. So you don't have to become one homogenous community, but what you can do is like share. Anyway, that's just my thoughts about it.
Well, so maybe there is a way of reframing the Home Secretary's requirement for everyone to volunteer then into some sort of way of more people understanding one another better than they're doing at the moment, rather than assuming that it requires every charity to take 10 immigrants.
Forced immigration. Forced volunteering, sorry.
And that, again, I'm being super charitable to this announcement here. But I once got told off by a colleague of mine back in government, when we had someone come in and they were running the department, and it was terrible. There were some really bad decisions being made, which we really thought, and I was playing this sort of role of trying to help make them a bit better than they otherwise might be. And this person came along to me and he said, "Look, will you please stop doing this? You're in danger of making sense of something which is completely ludicrous."
I thought they were going to say, "You're in danger of losing your life if you carry on, Peter." Defending the indefensible,
No, I think it was. I was taking my pragmatism. They were suggesting I was taking my pragmatism to extreme levels.
It's devil's advocating a bit as well, isn't it? Which can be quite a useful exercise, actually, to test thinking and things like that. But dangerous to be devil's advocate so far that people end up believing in and supporting a policy that's really dreadful.
Yeah. But the immigration thing is particularly difficult and particularly challenging, because I do feel we have to meet the public. Of course, there isn't one single public, but we have to meet public opinion where it is, and for whatever reason it's not where you and I would necessarily like it to be. But at the same time, we have to do that in a way where we hold on to our principles.
Well, although you say that, because I think to myself, the immigration thing, if you look at polls of public opinion, what they care about going back decades, most years, or most times when they do these polls, immigration often doesn't even feature in the top 10. It's like way down the list. What's happened is immigration has been adopted by some, I'm going to say it, bad-minded people to divert attention away from some of the real issues that are going on in the country, and to whip people up into a frenzy of, this fury that's going on. Because immigration hasn't been an issue. People didn't talk about it particularly. It did shoot up under Boris Johnson's government. It shot right up very, very quickly. And then it's shot right down, actually, in the last year under Labour, because I think they've deported 36,000
Yeah,
people or something like that. But the point I'm making is if you meet people where they are, you legitimise it. Whereas I think what we need to do is we need to tell people where the real problems lie. So it's not that we need to say to them, you're wrong about immigration, but we do need to talk about, here are the problems that you've got. We've got employers who exploit staff. We've got the gig economy. Let's talk about the real issues. So I'm, rather than meeting people where they are, because where they are is in like a sticky, horrible swamp of nastiness, but rather pointing out, by the way, look at this thing over here. This is the thing you should be shouting about, and get people marching on the streets about those stuff. So my approach would be to distract from what isn't, because immigration just isn't a problem. We've just bought into this trope that it's a problem. But to take it to those places where things really are a problem. Wealth inequality, for example, health inequality, shocking. The different health outcomes you get for Black pregnant women, for example, compared to white pregnant women, the different health outcomes you get in different parts of the country. That's outrageous. These are the things we need to be shouting out and getting angry about, because they are real and they are legitimate and there is evidence for them. There you go. That's my final word on the matter. Actually, no, it's not. I'm bound to bang on about it again. I lie. Listeners, I lie. You know I do.
Change the subject then.
Yeah, okay. Change the subject. Online tech. So also this week at the Labour Party conference, the government has announced this sort of techifisation. That's not a word. Technicalisation,
digitalisation,
who knows? But anyway, there's sort of new technical NHS, where they're talking about, it's going to be much, much easier to make appointments online.
Hooray!
To get treatments. Well, I must admit, I also feel hooray, Peter, to be honest, and I think there's dangers in it. So long as people don't feel that's the only option for them, particularly older people who are often less, they really want to go. I mean, my parents still won't bank online. They go into the local branch of their bank. They're lucky they still have one to do all their banking arrangements. And there's quite a lot of people like that. But no, I personally think it's a great idea. And you do too.
I do. I had a hospital appointment. I have got a hospital appointment coming up shortly. And I got a letter to tell me that when it was. And it's at a hospital in Kent. And of course, I'm now 175 miles away from there. It's impossible to do anything other than go online and rearrange the date to have it in Kent on a different date. No, can't get it done locally. It said if you wish to change or cancel, choose or phone this number. So I phoned the number, and all they could do at the end of the line was go to the same website that I went to and tell me I could have it a different day. And then they said, well, you could discuss this with your doctor. Well, I'm at the moment in a kind of vortex between doctors, which is another online process which hasn't caught up with this process. So in the end, I thought, well, do you know what? I'm just going to have to go to I don't want to lose my appointment. So I'm going to go. So I'm going to go all the way up there to get in now. If they could digitize that and have and there must be so many other things like this, because I very rarely have a hospital appointment, but people who are having to cope with these things all the time, and they are much more life and death situations. I'm all for it, really. And that business of having to get on the phone at 8 o'clock in order to,
I know, nightmare. Well, I used to my local surgery used to have an email facility, so I'd email reception, say, please can you ask my doctor this and that, and can I do ABC, and all this has happened. And 99% of the time I get a message back from my doctor saying, yes, no problem, I'll do a prescription, or send me a picture, let me have a look. And so we do it electronically. So I didn't have to hoik in. I wasn't taking up a physical appointment. It was just so much more efficient. Now they've stopped doing that now. So now I have to ring and make an appointment, and then he's got to ring me and I've got to ring back. And I can kind of understand why they would think that's good, because they talk about, they need the human interaction. But actually, it's really most, well, not so much now, obviously, because I have a number of health conditions now which do require lengthy conversations. But there's quite a few things where I really don't need to see the doctor. I don't even need to have a conversation. I just need to say, look, this is happening. Can you please? Or this prescription isn't working. Can we try something else? It doesn't need to take up physical time by doing it. So I'm quite a big fan of, and also during lockdown, I had quite a lot of, the many lockdowns, quite a lot of doctor's appointments that were video calls. which was brilliant.
Right.
I didn't have to drive anywhere. I wasn't using petrol. I wasn't like pumping shit into the air. Although, mind you, having said that, using computers is equally as bad, isn't it, for the environment? So I should be careful about that. But yeah, it was just, so I'm a fan personally, but I do understand there is maybe some people who are in more vulnerable circumstances or who are less confident about using these remote mechanisms.
In other walks of life, we're getting increasingly used to instant speed of thought, speed of response services, aren't we? And certainly my experiences of the NHS over the last 6 months have been way, way, way behind that. And it's one of the things that we were talking about at the schools conference as well.
Okay.
How do you engage and involve parents and young people practically in their education without completely overwhelming teachers, to create the space for them to offer structured feedback and be able to teach and learn and not in real time have to join the WhatsApp groups of parents complaining about this, that, and the other late into the evening, often after 3 or 4 glasses of wine. It's not a good use of teachers' time to be doing that. At the same time, you do want your parents, individually and collectively, to be engaged and involved in their young people's education. And that is certainly these days much more than pitching up once a term at a parents' evening.
Yeah.
So all of that has to be modernised.
Well, there is also the reality, and this is in particular for certain communities where talking about their health is very difficult and uncomfortable for them anyway, and men in particular as well are a factor in this. Is that one of the downsides of not actually speaking to somebody or physically being with somebody is that doctors may miss things that. So for example, you come in, you present with whatever, you might, I've got a bad knee, can we talk about my knee? And then they notice you seem a bit down, and the doctor will say to you, so Peter, are you okay? How are other parts of your life? And then you suddenly, actually, I've been feeling suicidal, I don't know what to do about it. But, so that is one of the downsides of it, is that, it often takes someone engaging with you and asking you other questions or noticing things like, oh, while I'm looking at your ankle, I've just noticed a really weird mole. Have you had a look? Do you know what I mean? So there's dangers to it. So what we have to do is ensure that there's a way of trying to capture as much of that, because so much of my experience is so much of health interventions are better when the medical professional you're dealing with knows you and understands your whole picture. In fact, our podcast producer Jose, his wife is a nurse, so I expect I'd be very interested to. I must ask Jose on another occasion what his wife thinks about, the onlineification or whatever the bloody word is.
We're going to need to stop because we're out of time. But interestingly, I have been asked by my new doctors to come in and see them because they like to engage directly with the people who move on to their books, which I was a bit surprised about, because that will be the first human doctor I've seen for a very long time.
Yeah. That's fantastic, though. What good practice.
Well, let's see. We'll see what it's like.
Well, it's
I'll report back, but I need to find out where it is now and wander down there.
And have a find out.
And
you'll probably end up hanging out in the local pub or watching the cricket with your doctor, Peter, because that's what happens in more rural communities.
I will see. I wonder if it'd be just like one of these doctors on a soap opera program. Who knows? All right, we better go.
Yes, we have.
Happy 1 year anniversary.
Oh, happy 1 year anniversary.
See you next time.
Yeah. Bye, listeners.
Okay. Bye.